It's a lovely autumn day and it's Play in the Shed day, and today's project is a little different. In fact, it's a project I've never attempted before and don't know whether it's going to work. However, if you're watching this, maybe it has worked, because I'm going to attempt to make a sign something like this one that I found on the internet. I've got a bit of probably what is 1.2mm steel. But the problem with making a sign like this is I don't have a vinyl cutter, and therefore it's going to be difficult doing the painting. Anyway, I've made up these couple of templates just using plain paper that's got sticky back on it, and I'm hoping this might work. I'll paint a base colour of white and then I'll use that template for the red, and this one on the left I'll use for the black. So failure is always an option in this shed, so let's get into it. May as well cut out the basic shape out of the steel, and using my little bandsaw, cuts through this steel like nothing. But I can't cut the full length, so I just have to finish it off with the angle grinder. The steel's not in pristine condition, so I'll just use a wire wheel here to clean off the excess rust and stuff. I'm aiming for a sign that looks sort of antique, which is just as well because there's no way that I'd be able to make this perfect. A flap disc on the angle grinder does a good job of rounding the corners and just smoothing out the edges. To make it easy to hang this sign, I'm going to put a couple of bolts in the back. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to drill a couple of holes with a tapping size for an M6 bolt. I'm going to tap the holes for an M6 bolt. The reason I'm doing this is that when I screw the bolts in, they'll stay nice and straight, and then I'll just weld them. The bolt heads on the back will enable me to put a string between the two. Of course, I only end up with about a thread and a half in this thin material, but it's enough to hold the bolt straight, which is all I need. So I just screw the bolt in with a little bit proud on the face side. It'll allow me to melt the weld, and this will hold them firmly in place. Because the sheet steel is quite thin and the bolts of course are 6mm, I aim the heat right in the middle of the bolt, and once the bolt starts to melt, I just move the torch in a small circular motion, and that melts the bolt into the sheet steel. Of course, I end up with a couple of blobs on the face of the sign, but I'll just grind them back with the flap disc. And because the face of the sign doesn't need to be perfect, I don't need to get these perfect either. Because this sign has 3 colours, I have to paint 3 times. So first of all, I'm going to put down a base layer of white. So I'm just using some metho to make sure it's nice and clean before I start. I haven't had to buy any materials to make this sign. I'm just using stuff that I've already got in the shed. It's the next day and it's time for that first template to be stuck down. So as I said before, the first template's going to be red, and I'm making sure it sticks down nice and smooth without any air bubbles. Right, this is where the fun starts. I've got a craft knife and I'm going to have to cut out every bit that I want to expose for painting. This is where having a vinyl cutter would make things so much easier, and of course being vinyl it also takes the paint really well. At this stage I still don't know whether this is going to work or whether the paint's just going to mongrelise the paper and everything's going to turn to poop. But again, if you're watching this, it must have worked, so feeling good. But needless to say, it's a slow, tedious job with very little room for error. Anyway, bit of red paint and we're moving along. So after this dries, we'll see whether the paper peels off easily or not. Well, here we go. It's very fiddly, and of course I've got to take this off before the paint dries completely. So that makes the job even more difficult. It's just as well I've got tiny little dexterous fingers. Well, so far so good. The paper seems to have survived. And yes, it's actually not looking too bad. There's a bit of bleeding, but I'm happy with that. Yet another day has passed and now it's time for the black. But I've got to get that oval right in the right place because there's a little white boundary around that red. So I'm going to cut out the oval without taking the sticky back off it. And then I'll stick the rest of it down, hopefully in exactly the right place. I'll use a couple of bits of masking tape just to hold it in place. Get that in the right place, and then I can stick that oval back over the red bits. Now that I've got that in place, I can peel off the rest of the backing paper and stick the whole thing down. With that done, I can carefully stick the oval back in place. Right, now I can cut out the bits that need to be made black. So there's a black boundary around that warning sign. And then I've got to cut out all those letters, the Kawasaki and the parking only. Oh dear, this is going to take a few minutes. But fortunately, due to the magic of television, you don't have to put up with that delay. All the bits are cut out. Time to put the black on. Now, what I had in stock was some red water paste spray, and that seemed to work pretty well, but this black is not water based. And I found out when I started to peel it off that it affected the paper and started to leave some of the glue behind. So if I ever make another sign, I'll use some water-based spray. But at the moment I'm thinking this might be a one-off. It's just as well this sign is going to be antiqued, so to speak, because my fumbly fingers got in the paint a bit and smudged it there, here and there. Anyway, I'm going to do a bit more smudging and rasping and carrying on so that it looks anything pristine. After that abuse, I'm just going to cover everything with some nice clear coat. This project has been fun in that I've proved to myself that it can be done. However, I'm not going to be rushing out and trying to make another one. It's very tedious, but the end result's quite pleasing. And the sign will be going to my mate Norman, who has a beautiful classic Z900 1975 model. You can see my review of this bike in the link right here on my bike channel. See you next time.